Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna get started. Can you go back to the background page, Gary? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to join this meeting. A MICCA election meeting, 2022 election meeting with the candidate series. Today is our 4th session, and we have pleasure to invite Mr. Tom Leonard to meet with us and talk with us tonight. And Tom is running for the position of Attorney General this year, and he has served for in public office many years in the past. He was served on the Michigan House of Representatives for 3 terms and the Speaker of the House for 1 term. And he is attorney, and he served as prosecutor in the past and Assistant Attorney General as well. So he has extensive experience in public service and in the law enforcement area. And for us, MICCA, we have met him about 4 years ago, as you can see on the photo on the lower right corner of the screen, when MICCA was helping some candidates running for positions in 2018 in the fall, October 6th in Wall Lake, and we met along with other candidates. We met Tom for the first time, and he was running for Attorney General at that time. So we have 4 years relationship already, and many of us on the photos are in this meeting today. Before I give the microphone to Tom, have him introduce his background, I want to mention that for the audience today, many of us are precinct delegates. So a few of us will be at the state convention in August and the endorsement convention in April. So we really appreciate this opportunity to discuss and talk with Tom to get to know your ideas. Things like your strategy for the campaigning this year. What did you learn from 4 years ago? And there are some questions we particularly interested, like for during the past 2 years, the pandemic time, our Asian American community, especially the Chinese American community, we face a special challenge. Some of the crimes performed done against us because of the pandemic. So we would like to know from the law enforcement standpoint what your position is. So we'll start introduce your background. Would you please also introduce the job description, function, or responsibilities of Attorney General of State of Michigan? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'm taking some notes here because there is a lot to cover. And first and foremost, and I'm going to make this screen a little bigger so I can see everybody. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you so much for your involvement. This election is going to be so critical and so important in 22. And I know that we have seen that over the last couple of years. So before I get into my background and before I get into the position of Attorney General, and even before I get into the campaign itself, you know, I tell people when I speak to them, whether it's a small group or a large group, or whether it's on Zoom or in an in-person meeting, that this particular campaign, you're not going to hear me talk much about I and me. It's going to be about we, and it's going to be about us, because every single one of us in this state have been impacted by Dana Nessel's dangerous actions as Attorney General. And I don't believe people really understood how powerful that position can be and how dangerous that position can be until somebody like her, who completely weaponizes the office, comes in there. And we've seen that over the last 2.5 years, especially during this pandemic. I've met so many people around the state that used to be small business owners, or who had parents that were small business owners, or friends or family that were small business owners that are no longer in business because Dana Nessel defended Gretchen Whitmer's unconstitutional orders for months on end. Imagine how different things may be in the state of Michigan if we had had an attorney general in place that would have told Gretchen Whitmer, enough is enough. You cannot shut these businesses down. You do not have the constitutional authority to do that. And I am no longer going to defend this for you. We would have probably had thousands of more businesses still in business today. And it didn't work. Michigan has some of the worst COVID results in the entire country. News just broke about an hour ago, and you're going to see an audit report come out that nursing home deaths were at least 30% higher than what they were originally reported. So our COVID results were much more tragic and much worse than other states. And yet our economic recovery has been far worse than other states. In fact, right now, Michigan is in the top 5 states for unemployment. Our economic recovery has been the worst in the Midwest, and that includes Illinois. And it hasn't just been COVID. When you look at this attorney general, she has done nothing to stand with law enforcement or for victims of crime. Right now in the state of Michigan, we have prosecutors that are no longer standing with law enforcement. They are no longer standing with victims. They are no longer enforcing our laws. In fact, the prosecutor in Ingham County, which is where Lansing is at, she sent a memo to law enforcement in that county several weeks ago. And she told them that if there was a traffic stop that involved the individual having a broken taillight or not using their blinker, and the police pulled that person over and walked up to the vehicle, and they found illegal guns or illegal drugs, or found out that person had committed a serious crime, she was no longer going to issue charges because she was going to deem that that stop was racist and that her social justice agenda is more important than standing with crime victims. What has that done to Ingham County, and what has it done to Lansing? For the first time, I believe, in the history of the city of Lansing is now in the top 10 in FBI crime statistics for violent crime. The city of Lansing, Michigan's capital city, is in the top 10 most violent cities in the entire country. And when law enforcement, when the Democrat elected sheriff of Ingham County held a press conference with other members of law enforcement and said, these policies are wrong. We cannot do this. We have to stand with victims. This attorney general was silent. And one of the duties that the attorney general has is they are the chief law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. The attorney general is the only person in the state of Michigan that has jurisdiction to fight crime and authorize charges against criminals in every single county in the state of Michigan. If I had been the attorney general when that prosecutor and other prosecutors issued those policies, I would have been standing with that sheriff. I would have been standing with law enforcement, and I would have told them that if their local prosecutor will not fight violent crime and they will not stand with victims, bring those warrants to me, because I will stand with them and I will stand with victims. This attorney general has been silent. This attorney general has not stood with law enforcement. In fact, there was a story just a couple weeks ago where a criminal tried to run over a police officer with a car, and the police officer shot at the vehicle in an effort to protect himself. His entire department cleared him of any wrongdoing and said what he was doing was justified and in self-defense. The state police cleared him. He was cleared through the county, and yet that was not good enough for the attorney general. She conducted her own investigation and she charged this police officer with a crime. And the criminal charges were so bad, they were so bad that a judge within weeks looked at the facts and dismissed the charges by himself because he said there's absolutely nothing here. So we have an attorney general that thinks it's okay to defend violent criminals and let them get away. Yet if one of our brave police officers on the streets that's out there defending us tries to defend their own lives, she will charge them with a crime. That is this attorney general. As we've been traveling the state, I've met parents of children who are suffering from severe mental health issues because they've been locked out of school for months on end, some of them for nearly 2 years. Many of them lost their last season in sports. Many of them didn't get to go to their senior prom. The list goes on and on. And it's because this attorney general defended these unconstitutional orders. If she would have just done the right thing, if she would have just defended the Constitution and told this governor, enough is enough, how many of those children would have been back in school? I brought up the nursing home situation. The one thing that we knew about COVID, yes, it was a novel virus, and we are still learning about it. But the one thing that we knew when COVID hit the United States and when it hit Michigan was that that virus should be nowhere near anybody who has an underlying condition or somebody that is elderly. And yet this attorney general helped this governor by defending her actions. She helped her send COVID patients into nursing homes where thousands died, and we still do not have answers because this attorney general will not ask any questions or conduct an investigation to determine what happened. Yet they were willing to send COVID patients into nursing homes, but they locked other patients in their rooms and wouldn't even allow their families to come see them. They wouldn't allow them to hug their grandchildren. They wouldn't allow them to see their children. How many of those individuals that perished may have died of a broken heart because they had given up hope because they could no longer see their families because this radical attorney general had locked them into these nursing homes. And the list with Dana Nessel goes on and on. And that's why I said this campaign, it's not about me and it's not about I, it's about we and it's about us. It's about every one of us on this Zoom meeting. It's about every one of us across the state because we have all been impacted by her dangerous actions. Now, a little bit of background about myself. You saw the pictures of my beautiful family. And many of you on this meeting that were at those events probably met Hannah when we had her on the campaign trail a few years ago. I think at the time she was 2, she's 5 now, and she's looking forward to meeting everybody again. But in the meantime, during that 3-year period where I was out of office, we had a second child. His name is Thomas, and he's actually the 4th. Now, when I say the 4th, I don't mean he's our 4th child. We have 2, but I'm actually the 3rd. There was my grandfather, my father, me. We all had the same names, Thomas Leonard. I'm the 3rd, and then Thomas, we named him, and he's the 4th. So he's the 4th, Thomas Larry Leonard, and I look forward to bringing him to meet everybody as well. But you may have heard me speak about back when we had Hannah, Janelle and I, the struggles that we had to have children. We had tried for several years, and it's interesting. We'd actually started the adoption process, and we were actually going to go to China through Bethany Christian Services to adopt a little child from China. And about 3 or 4 days before we were going to put a very large down payment on the adoption, we found out that Janelle was pregnant. So hopefully adoption will still be in our future. But the good Lord, he provided us with a child. But the reason I bring that up is because the sanctity of life is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And one organization that recently endorsed us, and I could not be more proud of to have their endorsement, is Right to Life of Michigan. And that is a very important endorsement. And I believe it says a lot, not just because of where I stand on life, but this is the first time in decades that Right to Life of Michigan has actually endorsed during an attorney general convention race. They know how important this race is, and they know that we need to put up our most qualified candidate, and the candidate that is in the best position to win. So as it relates to the campaign, I do believe and I know that we are in the best position to win this race. Why do I know this? Number one, we've already got the team in place. Number two, about 2 months ago, we had to release our first campaign finance report in addition to all the other individuals that are running for statewide office. With the exception of Chief James Craig, our campaign out fundraised every single statewide Republican candidate for every office across the state that cycle or that quarter. We raised over $400,000 in 1 month. Now, why is that important? If you look at the nuts and bolts of an attorney general campaign and what it costs to run an attorney general campaign, to hire staff, to purchase your signs, to put up your website, to do all the basic stuff that you have to do, it costs about $400,000. And then you have to raise another $3 million to put your message on the airwaves, to go on television, to do your digital media ads, to do your radio ads. Our campaign has already raised the funds that we need to run our campaign. Now, every single dime that we raise will be going directly to the airwaves to promote our message to make certain that we beat Dana Nessel. Our fundraising advantage is so great per the last finance period. If you take the other two individuals running for attorney general and you add up what they were able to raise, our amount was double than both of theirs together. In fact, the next closest competitor, we got a 12-to-1 advantage on that individual. That is so important because we are going to need to be well-funded if we are going to beat Dana Nessel in November. And there's no doubt that we have put the team in place to do that. So number one, we've got the best campaign. And number two, I truly believe that I am the most qualified candidate in this race. I am the only candidate that has worked as a county prosecutor for the state of Michigan. I was a prosecutor in Flint for 3 years. I spent most of that time working in our special crimes division in Flint, which prosecuted most of the major drug dealers, the gang activity, as well as serious homicides. I am the only one running for office, for the office of Attorney General, that can actually say, I have done that. Number two, as Speaker of the House, I not only gained the political experience, but I gained the management experience that it takes to run that office. When I was Speaker of the House, we had around 400 employees that I was responsible for managing. I had about a $56 million operating budget that I was responsible for implementing. That number of staff for the House of Representatives is almost exactly the same number of attorneys and support staff that are in the Attorney General's office. I have that management experience. And then number three, I have been the most vetted candidate of all that are running. What do I mean by that? You may remember through watching reading in the news a couple of years ago, shortly after I left office, the White House called me and President Trump wanted to nominate me to be the United States Attorney for the Western District of Michigan. He wanted me to be his top federal prosecutor to represent him and the west side of Michigan to prosecute all of the major federal crimes for him. That required me to go through an extensive background check through the FBI. It required me to go through extensive questioning. The one thing I can tell you is that no other candidate has been more vetted than me. If there's anything out there, it would be out there. I'm telling you, you're not going to have an October surprise next year. What's out there is out there, and we are ready to go win. Now, unfortunately, and I'll close with this, it was tragic, but I believe it shows what a great campaign they knew that we could put together if we ran for Attorney General. Unfortunately, I never got to serve as a United States Attorney because the U.S. attorneys are the one position within the state of Michigan that a sitting state senator, if they want to, they've got veto power and they can block. Unfortunately, Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters blocked my nomination. And they flat out told the White House when they blocked my nomination, they said Tom Leonard in 2018 was the closest Republican to winning statewide office of everybody that ran. And our Democratic base has essentially told us we can never allow him to hold another position to be able to run for office in the future because we know he will likely win if he runs again. They told the White House chief legal counsel that. So even they knew that I would be a strong candidate if I ran again. So I look forward to working with every single person on this Zoom meeting across the state. As I said, it's about we, it's about us. And the last thing I'm going to say, and this is the message that I have been taking to everybody across the state, is that this party, our Republican Party and conservatives, from whatever background you're from or from whatever part of the state, we have to unite as we head into 22, and we have to work together as a united party. We've got great things ahead of us in 22, but the only way we're going to be successful is if we unite. And I tell people every day, if you're looking for somebody to attack other Republicans or attack other conservatives, I'm not your person, because I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to focus on one person and one person only, and that is Dana Nessel, and doing everything I can to ensure that our state finally gets rid of the most dangerous attorney general that the state has ever seen. So with that, I will open it up to questions that anybody may have.
Hi, Tom. There are a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to read those out to you. So the first question coming from Mr. Bing Yang. If the crime has not passed statute limit, are you going to open the investigation and prosecute those criminals escaped punishment under the current Attorney General, Dana Nessel? Once you win the office.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and I don't know if he was speaking about a specific crime or just crimes in general, but certainly, you know, having been a prosecutor, I can tell you there always needs to be a thorough investigation. And, you know, if there's an alleged crime, there needs to be an investigation. But absolutely, if there is an investigation and there is proof that a crime, a felony has been committed, and there is some prosecutor that is not charging that crime, if the statute of limitations has not run, so if the charges can still be brought, absolutely, if somebody has committed a crime, my office would certainly be willing to charge that. Again, if there was proof and an investigation had been done.
Okay, thank you for the answer. The next two questions, actually it's the same question, but coming from two different people, Mr. Bing Yang and Yan. It's about the election fraud happened in 2020. So if you're elected to the office, are you going to look into the election fraud from 2020? And how do you plan to prevent this from happening again?
Well, the biggest thing that I would do, and I know this sounds, many people don't understand this. The one thing that we know about the 20 election is this, that the media just simply is not talking about, and a lot of people don't know this when I say this. The biggest thing I'm going to do is enforce the law. What does that mean? In 2020, a lot of people don't know this. In Michigan, we have what we call for absentee ballots. We have a signature verification requirement, which means if you take out an absentee ballot, you have to sign that you are who you say you are, and then the clerk looks at your signature and makes certain that it matches on file before the clerk actually counts that vote, because you don't want fraudulent people saying there's somebody that they are not. During the 2020 election, the Attorney General issued or I'm sorry, the Secretary of State issued an opinion and the Attorney General defended it. Basically, she told every clerk across the state, I want you to assume that every single signature, I don't care what it looks like, I don't care if the signature looks valid or not, I want you to assume it's valid and I want you to count every single one of those ballots. And the Attorney General defended that position. And a judge ruled and said, essentially, this Attorney General was wrong. She put her thumb on the scale in favor of Joe Biden because she failed to defend our election laws in the state of Michigan. So first things first, we have to have an Attorney General that is going to enforce the law. Unfortunately, I don't believe we're ever going to know how many votes that alone cost us. It could have been tens of thousands of votes, people that may, and I say may, have voted illegally because this Attorney General refused to enforce the law. We have to have an Attorney General that's going to enforce the law. And then second, certainly, going back to my previous answer about crimes, if there is, any fraud that's proven, if somebody was behind it and a crime was committed, certainly that person would be prosecuted if there was proof that a crime was committed.
Okay, thank you. We talk about enforcing the law by reading the description or job function of Attorney General. That's the position you are running.
Yep.
Maybe you can explain to us what are the main job for Attorney General.
So the Attorney General, they can, each Attorney General can bring within the office their own particular priorities and really focus on those priorities. And I want to talk about a couple of them that are mine, but the two main functions of the Attorney General's office, as I said, number one, they are the chief law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. So they are the person that is supposed to enforce the laws in the state of Michigan. Number two, the Attorney General is the state's attorney. What do I mean by that? So for instance, if there is a state trooper or a state corrections officer that's employed by the state of Michigan, if they do something on the job and they get sued by a criminal or maybe somebody in prison, that person needs representation when they get sued. It's the Attorney General is who defends them, or it's the Attorney General's office who defends them because they are state employees and the Attorney General is acting as the state's attorney. If, let's say, you may have heard about the new Gordie Howe Bridge that's being built in Detroit right now. That bridge required a lot of legal work through the state of Michigan, and much of that was done through the Attorney General's office because the Attorney General is the state's attorney. So in addition to being the state's chief law enforcement officer, the Attorney General is also the state's attorney. Number three, the Attorney General has the power and is responsible for what's called Attorney General opinions. What is an Attorney General opinion? If it happens to be an area of law that might be gray, or there might not be certainty, or there needs to be an interpretation, if a judge or a court has never ruled or interpreted, then a legislator can issue a letter to the Attorney General and say, hey, we would like an opinion on what this law means and how it should be interpreted. When the Attorney General issues that opinion has the rule of law unless it's overturned by a judge or unless the legislature overturns it through a different law or amends the law that they are interpreting. So I could give you a hypothetical example. When the governor had the state locked down, one of the main issues at the Supreme Court was after the governor had the state under emergency order for 28 days, under the Constitution, did she need to go back to the legislature to get permission? Now, I believe the law was clear that she did, and she didn't do that. Unfortunately, while she was violating the law, it took months to get the case to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to finally rule. If there had been a rule of law conservative attorney general in office at that time, a legislator could have issued a letter to the attorney general asking the question, is the governor violating the Constitution? And once that attorney general issued that opinion and said yes, then immediately her actions would have had to have stopped. So those opinions have a lot of, they are very powerful, and a lot of it, they have a lot of authority, and the attorney general is able to issue them. But as I said, the attorney general can also bring, priorities for themselves as well, as long as they're legal. One of my big ones, in addition to reprioritizing the office to make certain that we're fighting violent crime and we're standing with law enforcement, we're standing with victims, something else that is very near and dear to my heart, and it has been for years, even as a young man, has been working with those and helping those that suffer from mental health issues. I saw this when I was a prosecutor. I saw this when I clerked for the probate judge in Genesee County when she started the first mental health court in the entire state of Michigan. And there are many people out there that if you can just get them the help that they need, they won't be out on the streets committing violent crimes. And as the state's next attorney general, I really want to focus on mental health issues. One of the things that I believe the attorney general's office could do, I mentioned mental health courts and how successful they have been getting those people that have mental health issues that may commit minor crimes, getting them into a mental health court and getting them the help they need before they commit a violent crime. Many counties just simply don't have the funding, and prosecutors' offices don't have the funding to actually participate or implement these mental health courts, or at least make them function very efficiently and effectively. If I was the state's attorney general, I would be working with all of our local prosecutors to ensure that we have treatment courts across the state to help those individuals that are suffering from mental health issues. That would be a big priority of mine, and that's something that the attorney general could do if he or she wanted to focus on.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. The mental health issue is the root cause of many of the serious crimes, which lead to the next question in the chat from a young lady, middle schooler called Alisa Tom. Her question is, what is your idea about gun control? I think what she has in her mind is the Oxford terrible incident at Oxford High, and which similar to the question you just talked about. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So what happened in our state a few weeks ago with this tragic event, I mean, there are no words to describe how awful and how heinous and how terrible and how tragic that was. But we also have to be honest. This clearly is a young man who was suffering from some major mental health issues. Now, I can't promise that if there had been more programs in place, or if there had been mental health courts in place, it would have prevented it. But we've got to go to the root of the problem and help those individuals that are suffering before they do this. Number two, and we have to understand, this young man, he committed dozens of crimes when this tragedy occurred. If there had been more laws on the books, I don't believe they would have stopped him from committing this tragedy. The one thing that I learned as a prosecutor, and we as conservatives, we can't be afraid to discuss and to push back on. The left loves to use tragedies to implement what they want to, despite the fact that the laws that they want to implement wouldn't have even helped the crimes they say they were going to prevent. When I was a prosecutor, I never once met a bad person or met a criminal that said in their statement or their confession, I chose not to use a gun because I knew it would be illegal if I used one. Yet I can't tell you how many victims of crimes that I met, law-abiding citizens, that said, if only I had had a firearm, or if only I'd had my CPL, I could have defended myself, or I could have defended my family when that animal attacked us. And what I have learned with gun crimes or gun laws is that every time the legislature implements a new law, it only hurts the law-abiding citizens. The criminals will not abide by them. And quite frankly, the only thing that's going to stop a bad person with a gun, if they are committing a heinous crime and trying to hurt somebody, is a good person with a gun. And if we pass more laws, that means the good people will no longer have firearms, but the bad people will still have them. So when it comes to gun control, I believe in Second Amendment rights, most importantly. And if you have a Michigan Constitution, or you can tonight, I would Google search it. Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution makes clear that citizens of the state of Michigan have a state constitutional right, absolute right, to carry and possess a firearm for the safety of them and their families. And so I am one that will abide by the Constitution. I'm going to protect our right to keep and bear arms. But as a policy matter, more gun laws are going to do nothing but empower and put more guns in the hands of bad people and take them out of the hands of good people. Another thing I want to mention on this issue, going back to what I said about that prosecutor earlier, these prosecutors are no longer prosecuting certain gun crimes. Yet these same prosecutors want the legislature to pass stiffer gun laws. So essentially what these prosecutors are saying is, we're not going to enforce the laws that are on the books as it relates to violent criminals. We are going to allow them to have guns, yet we want you to pass more laws that are going to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. To me, that is backwards, and it's something that we really need to push back on.
Thank you. For everyone on the line, please feel free to unmute yourself and you can speak up if you want to ask questions. Don't have to wait for me to read all the questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself.
So I have a question. What is our founding fathers' intention to do the Second Amendment? You know, now a lot of politicians, including President Biden, when they are against people holding a gun or have a larger magazine, they say, okay, we don't need that to do the hunting. But I don't think our founding father intention for people or militia has a gun or firearm is for hunting. As an Attorney General, what is your interpretation of this Second Amendment?
Right. So when I go, so I will go to the Second Amendment in just a moment. But as I said, I always go, particularly for Michigan citizens, I always go to Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution, because Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution is much more clear. It gives us much greater gun protections, and it was written in 1963. So when all these politicians say, well, the Second Amendment was written back, you know, with the founding fathers, I say, well, what about Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution that was written in 1963? And they don't have an answer to that. But in terms of these far left arguments about how, well, we should be able to control firearms because the founding fathers didn't have the same firearms as we did then. You know what? Our founding fathers, if the Congress and the states want to do something about that, they gave us a way to fix it if that's what they want to do, and that is through amending the United States Constitution. And what I find very interesting about that argument, if you think about this, I would ask the same person that says, well, firearms were different back then than they are now. So now we should be able to control them. My question would be this: the First Amendment was written at the same time. Should the government right now by themselves be able to ban cell phones? Should they be able to ban social media? Should they be able to ban the internet? Because the internet and cell phones and social media was not around back when the First Amendment was written, yet all of these are First Amendment issues. So I'm in no way advocating that we ban those things. I'm just saying they want to pick and choose these arguments for one area of the Constitution that they don't like. And if they don't like that part of the Constitution, our founding fathers gave them a way to address that, and that is through amending it. You can't just start making stuff up.
Tom, this is Gary. I got a question for you. In the recent few years, we have seen the crimes went up dramatically. And in light of what happened last year during the holiday season in Wisconsin, Waukesha, a violent criminal, bailed out at $1,000 and drove the car into the crowd and killed 6 innocent persons and injured dozens. Major tragedy occurred on our land. And also remember, Chief Craig was talking about when Detroit police were putting the criminals behind the bars, the criminals were saying, you know what, before you finish your shift, I'm out. I'll be out. Because it's so easy to get a bail, so easy to get out. So as a state attorney, Attorney General, hopefully you'll be elected. I'm sure you will. Is anything you can do at your power to stop those district attorneys, liberal district attorneys or prosecutors from harming their citizens by doing so?
So again, the Attorney General has to enforce the laws, even if they don't like the ones that they have to enforce. What I would say about this bail reform that's going on across the country, and first, I do want to tell you this before I give my position. I'm always a very transparent person. The law firm that I work at Plunkett Cooney, one of my main clients is the American Bail Coalition, and I represent them in making certain that these laws don't pass around the country that would eliminate bail. Okay. I want to give that caveat that I represent them, because I don't want to give my position and then later on you learn that I represent a client and you think the reason I gave that position is because of the representation that I have of that client. So I just want to give that full disclosure and be transparent. But these bail reform laws are dangerous. And some of them are even being pushed by Republicans. And I even tell these Republicans, these are dangerous. We have seen what it did in New York. We have seen what it has done in San Francisco. We've seen what it has done in Chicago. And what we have seen with those 3 cities, when you look at the history of the liberal agenda and the things that get implemented across this country, usually these things start in New York, San Francisco, or Chicago. And then it takes just a couple years before they start getting implemented in other states like Michigan. The last thing Michigan needs is a New York style bail system where these criminals are getting out, like you said, before these officers are even off duty. So I totally oppose this bail reform. Now, if the bail reform passes and the legislature decides to eliminate cash bail in the state of Michigan, there wouldn't be much the Attorney General could do about that, because that would be the law of the state of Michigan. So what would I do as the Attorney General? You better believe one of the things I'm going to do is advocate vigorously on behalf of law enforcement and victims. And if the legislature tries to eliminate cash bail in Michigan when I'm the Attorney General, I may not have a vote on that, but you better believe I will be at those committee hearings and I will be testifying against this, and I will do everything I can to tell these legislators I will work to hold you accountable if you vote to do this.
Thank you, Tom.
Anyone else want to ask Tom a question?
Yeah, I will. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh.
Cindy.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. I'm
Hi.
Cindy. Yeah, I just want to turn on the video so you can see me when we talk.
Hi, Cindy.
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw myself on the pictures. That means I helped with your year 2018 campaign. So yeah, I'm really happy to help some. I remember back to year 2018, it was really close, right? You got, I think, 40, close to 47%, and then I got 49%, something like that. Yeah, so
Yes.
it's really, really close. So I'm wondering, so my question will cover two parts. First is like any lessons learned you already had experience, what you learned, the lessons you learned from last campaign, and what you want to do differently this time.
Yes. So I think we have three really big advantages working for us this time that we did not have last time. Okay. The first one, and this is going to be the political nerd in me, okay, talking about numbers, but I think they're so important to understand. Okay. In Michigan, if you look at the history of Michigan, Michigan is a midterm state, and often if a party is in the White House, so if a Republican is in the White House, usually it does not go well for for Republicans in Michigan, and vice versa. If a Democrat's in the White House, it doesn't go well for Democrats in Michigan. When President Obama was in the White House during his first midterm, Rick Snyder, our Republican governor, won that year by the biggest landslide our state had seen in nearly 40 years. He won by nearly 20% because President Obama was so unpopular. At that time, President Obama was polling at about 43 or 44% in the state of Michigan. President Biden is now high 30s. So I believe there is going to be a much different atmosphere. When I ran back in 18, obviously there was a Republican in the White House, and it's always difficult for your party to run when your party's in the White House. The environment's going to be completely changed. Number two, what I would say is that Dana Nessel now has been completely exposed. When I ran in 2018, I would tell police officers she wasn't going to stand with them and victims, but she hadn't taken office yet. They didn't know that that's how she was going to be. I told business owners that she was going to come after them. They didn't believe it. I told people all the things that she was going to stand for, but she didn't have the record. Now she's got the record, and now she has to defend it, and she will not be able to. The third thing I will say is this. As a party, a Republican party, we got much smarter this time around. Back in 2018, you may remember Dana Nessel became the nominee in March of 2018. So she was able to spend, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. She spent 8 months running a statewide campaign. Republicans, we did not choose our nominee. I did not become the nominee until late August. So I only had September and October. I only had 2 months to run a statewide campaign. Dana Nessel had 8 months. Thankfully, we moved the convention up this time to April to give our nominees an additional 4 to 5 months to campaign. I believe if I had become the nominee in April of 2018, we could have raised an additional $1 million to $1.5 million. If we would have done that, we could have purchased a lot more airtime on the television, and that may have made the difference. As you mentioned, it was the closest election that year. The top of the ticket, the governors in the governor's race lost by almost 10. The Secretary of State's state candidate lost by 9. We lost by 2%. We got this close in a really tough environment with an attorney general that didn't have a record, who had an 8-month advantage on us. Now we're going to be running against her. She's going to have a record. She's going to be exposed, and we're going to have several more months to put together a statewide campaign. So that's going to be the big thing. And I will tell you, that segues into one of the reasons why I'm doing this call tonight, not just because of the convention, but you know what? Once we become the nominee in April and we have those extra few months, we're going to be able to build coalitions across the state, whether it be with Chinese Americans, African Americans, Catholics, Baptists, you name it. We are going to have the time to build coalitions across the state to help us defeat Dana Nessel in 2018. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to put together coalitions last time because once I became the nominee, we only had 2 months to put together a campaign.
Okay, I see. That's really insightful information. I never know that. Yeah, the information behind. That's good. So another part of my question is, so in last 4 years, I assume everyone witnesses the increasing violent crimes and heartbreaking incidents happening in our state, just around us, in our hometowns. So I think that's really is a benefit for you to fight with Dana this time. Yeah, so I think
it will be a big one, and I will tell you, I mean, two of the groups of people that Republicans really struggled with in the last couple of elections were, number one, in the urban areas, and number two, with suburban women. And I believe when you look at both of those groups, when we really hit this criminal justice message and we bring to light just what Dana Nessel and Democrats have done on crime across the state, suburban women, I'm married to a suburban woman. I talk to suburban women often. And you know what? The number one thing that they care about, especially when they have children, is making certain that they live in safe communities. They don't believe in this defund the police movement. They don't believe in prosecutors that let violent criminals walk. They don't believe in eliminating cash bail so that somebody that commits a domestic violence can get out within a matter of minutes and come back and commit the same crime. They don't believe in that. But also this defund the police movement, what's really sad is that this movement is being pushed by a bunch of liberal elitists that live in gated communities, and they go into these urban areas and tell those individuals, we want to defund your police department. Let me tell you something, the people that I talk to in urban areas in Detroit and Flint, they value their police. They don't want their police gone. They want to make certain that they can call somebody if some violent crime is occurring. So all that to say, I believe we can make really good headway in this next election cycle on this criminal justice message, particularly with suburban women who really care about the safety of their communities for their children. And number two, individuals in these urban areas, which is where the left-wing politicians are trying to defund the police and take away their public safety.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. Yeah, I really like the slogan, one of them on your website. We fight for our most vulnerable. Yeah, our children, our seniors. So yes, that's a fight together. Mm-hmm. Best of luck to your campaign this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, talking about the defund the police, we Chinese American communities, although we are also divided between left and the right, but we have a common agreement that we support our law enforcement. We support our police officers because we know when the police is being defunded, the policing effort is being reduced, we're going to be the victim, just because we are smaller and naturally weaker, and we are a minority groups, so we tend to be the victim. That's why our Chinese American communities in the Oakland County, Wayne County area, during the past 2 years, we have organized a few times to support our local police departments during the summer riot time 2 years ago, during the holiday season the past 2 years, to show our support to the local police. And we know that community safety is very important for us, and we do need help from the government, especially from the police department. That also goes to two other questions in the chat. I think people are just very much worried about the community safety, especially at the school. If you win the position this time as Attorney General, within your ability, and what can you do that to prevent from the mentally ill people from committing the serious violent crimes, especially at school? I know you already answered a little bit, but I think we had more people joining later and ask the same question again.
Yeah, and I just say, you know, for me, I'm a huge proponent of treatment courts and mental health courts. Now, again, I can't say that if they're, you know, that, you know, we would have been able to get this young man into a mental health court. I don't know, but what I will tell you is this. I worked for a judge that implemented the first mental health court in the state of Michigan. And I saw people come into that mental health court that were much like that young man. You could tell they had some serious problems and some serious issues. And by the time they left that court, they were back on their medication. They were back to functioning. They had jobs. They were back in school, and they were just much better people. And again, I am just a strong proponent of mental health courts and doing everything we can to get every person that suffers from some type of mental illness the help that they need.
Thank you. And there are 2-3 other questions still goes back to the election fraud. What can you do to prevent things happening again, such as the ballot harvest or illegal ballots? Let's see, what else? If you were elected.
So we have to make certain that there are laws on the books that would allow us to do that. And what I would say is right now, the biggest thing that we can do, there is a petition drive going across the state right now. And what would happen with this petition drive, if they can collect the signatures, it would be what's called a citizens initiated law. And if we can collect 450,000 signatures, the ballot would then go directly to the legislature. And if they passed it, it would become law. The governor could not veto it. And in this ballot initiative, it would prohibit ballot harvesting. It would make certain that there has to be a strong signature verification requirement for absentee ballots. It would require an ID to vote. But then last, another thing that it would do, it would prohibit billionaires from across the state, or excuse me, from across the country, pouring millions of dollars into areas across the country to turn out the vote in Democrat-rich areas the way that Mark Zuckerberg did from Facebook in the 2020 election. We got to get that thing passed. If we can get that to the legislature's desk and that becomes law, and I become Attorney General, I will make certain that those laws are enforced. Ballot harvesting will be done. Everybody will have to show an ID if they are going to vote. We will have a strong signature verification requirement, and billionaires from across the country will no longer be able to come in and try to buy Michigan's elections.
Are those things today legal in the state of Michigan or not?
Right now we have an ID requirement. I will just say it's very weak. Mm-hmm. Basically there's no, you can simply walk in and for no reason just say, hey, I forgot my ID or whatever, check a box and walk off. That what this would do is it would require you to either show an ID, and if you don't show the ID, what would happen is you could fill out your ballot and the clerk would set it aside, and then you would have a certain time period, I believe it would be 2 days, to come in and present that ID before they actually count the ballot. So it would be a much stronger ID. And then again, there would be much stronger laws as it relates to ballot harvesting in the state of Michigan. And then in regards to these billionaires putting this money into these communities to turn out votes in strongly Democrat areas, no, to the best of my knowledge, there is no law right now that would prevent that. This ballot initiative would make certain that that is stopped.
What about to validate the mail-in ballots and the absentee ballots? What kind of law do we have now? And are you allowed to enforce it if you're in the position?
So the big one would be the signature verification requirement that Dana Nessel did not enforce last time. So again, what happens is if you're going to vote absentee, you have a signature on record in the clerk's office. And if you vote absentee, when they get your ballot, if the signature doesn't match the one that they have on file, then they don't count that ballot because they know it's not you. The Attorney General did not enforce that last time. I would make certain that that law is enforced.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Anyone on the line wants to speak up? You can mute yourself, ask questions.
Hey, Tom, this is Mike. Thanks for the time you're spending with us. It's very helpful. I heard 2020, Governor Whitmer's policy placing patients sick with the coronavirus in nursing home. Dana refused to investigate that policy. Was that just rumor or there's some truth to it? What is your opinion and position on that?
No, it's 100% true. That's not a rumor. It's true. She will not investigate. Dana Nessel will not investigate what happened. And I've been very clear. We need to investigate what happened. Now, I'm not saying that a crime was committed. We don't know. There needs to be an investigation. But what I'm saying is that thousands of people died. They perished unnecessarily. And this Attorney General will not conduct an investigation to determine what happened. That is wrong, and there needs to be an investigation. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, when I got on this meeting, news just broke before I got on. There has been an investigation, not from the Attorney General, but from the Auditor General, the other AG, and the only reason he investigated was because the legislature asked him to, and news just broke that COVID nursing home deaths were at least 30% higher than what we originally thought.
Wow. I think that's a good point to have enough emphasis on to win over those families who lost loved ones because of that policy, regardless the party line. That is just my opinion.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mike.
There's two other questions, the same thing in the chat. What is your opinion on vaccine mandate? Is this a First Amendment issue? Is this a public safety or public emergency issue? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I have been one of the most outspoken candidates about this. I 100% oppose the Joe Biden vaccine mandate. I'm not against vaccinations. I'll be very honest with everybody on this screen. Personally, I did get vaccinated a few months ago, but it was a personal choice that I chose to do. I do not believe this is something the government should be mandating, especially the president of the United States. I mean, he didn't work through Congress. He didn't work through the states. I mean, one, I believe it's an individual liberty. I don't believe government should be able to tell you that to force you, period. But you definitely cannot, if a president in DC can just sign a piece of paper and force every American to get vaccinated, my question would be, then what limits are there on his power? I don't know if there would be any. So I am really hoping that the Supreme Court will do the right thing and rule this mandate unconstitutional, because that is what it is.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions in the chat. If anyone wants to ask questions, I'll take a couple more before we close tonight. Just unmute.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
This is Xiaowei. Thank you, Tom, for your message here. Really great. So your comment about taking care of mental health issue is so pivotal for public safety, I think. So it strikes a chord with me. So really appreciate your pledge, for that. So that leads to a question like the Oxford high school tragedy. This young minor perpetrator, young boy, he was charged for manslaughter, probably, or murder. But he was charged as an adult, although he's only 15 years old.
Oh.
And then at the same time, his parents are also charged with involuntary manslaughter, negligence also probably. So this is kind of contradictory to me in my mind. If the boy was charged as an adult, then why charge his parents? If you charge his parents for negligence or involuntary manslaughter, why charge the boy as an adult? So there are legal questions that puzzled, this puzzled me. So as Attorney General, is there a role, do you play a role in these type of situations, or who is making the judgment? And because I think maybe I'm not the only person who is puzzled. So
Right.
I just want to understand from your point of view.
So in this particular situation, there would be two authorities or two elected officials that could make a decision. One would be the Oakland County prosecutor, and the other one would be the state's attorney general. Now, it would be very difficult for the attorney general, and I don't even know if the attorney general would have authority to tell a prosecutor they could not bring charges. So if I was the attorney general, if Karen McDonald, the prosecutor in Oakland County, if she was charging somebody that I didn't think should be charged, legally, she's an elected official with that jurisdiction. I don't know how the attorney general could stop her. Where the attorney general could step in is if there's a prosecutor that does not bring charges. Then the attorney general would have authority to bring charges if he or she wanted to. But I don't know that the attorney general would have the authority to tell a local elected prosecutor that they cannot exercise that authority. And
okay,
in the one
thank you
thing,
for the explanation.
in the one thing as tragic as this was, it sickened me the way that Dana Nessel played politics with this situation. I mean, if you think about this, within 2 days of this tragedy occurring, she issued a press release saying that she wanted to conduct an independent investigation into what happened, which is fine, but guess what? She never contacted the superintendent, and she never contacted any of the school administrators. If she was serious about helping them, would she have communicated with them via a press release, or would she have picked up the phone when the news media wasn't talking about it, given them a call and said, hey, as the state's top law enforcement officer, I am here to offer you any resource that is available in our office. And guess what? I don't need a press release to do that. I want to help you because it's the right thing to do. She completely politicized this tragic event, and it was very sad.
So what's your position with the school? Like what's the school's responsibility in these type of events, tragedies?
So, at this point, and this is the prosecutor in me, I don't know that there are enough public facts for anybody to be able to say what should or shouldn't happen with any of the school officials right now. We don't know what they knew. We don't know how they knew it. We don't know if they tried to get this young man help. I mean, there are so many facts that we don't know that are still being investigated. I believe it would be reckless for me to start saying what should happen to somebody criminally without even knowing the facts of what they knew or before an investigation was done.
I agree with you. Thank you. I think, yes, not politicizing things, events, these type of events, definitely it's wrong.
Yes.
I have a question. I'm Jieming. 张宁，你听得见我吗？
Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to continue with the question Cindy just asked. And Tom was, I'm so excited that you re-enter the race. My question is, you talked about the advantages you have this year compared to 2018. And my question is, what you are going to do, or your campaign team is going to do differently, or what kind of effort you will make on top of the advantages you have. And also, if you get nominated in the April convention, what we can help as a Chinese conservative Chinese Americans, how can we help?
Yep. So the big thing with our campaign, as I said, is going to be having this early convention so we can put together a statewide campaign much earlier. I mean, right now, so much of my focus is on getting those delegates in place. We haven't been able to put together the statewide campaign the way that we want to, but we are off to a much better start even than we were 4 years ago. The one thing I didn't mention, I mentioned fundraising, but we are actually in a much better position right now financially. Our campaign, we have more cash on hand than we did at this time 4 years ago, and I have a bigger staff. We are just running everything the right way. But in terms of how you can help, we are going to do everything we can to build coalitions across the state. And having a coalition, if you'd be willing to help us with this, I know that Asian, and I know that particularly that Chinese American or Chinese Michigander vote is going to be very, very, very important in November. And if you can help us build a coalition with Chinese, I say Chinese Americans, but in this case, it would be Chinese Michiganders, help us build that coalition to get the word out to your community. I know it would be a huge help, and it would make a big difference, especially if we have a close election.
Thank you. We will do our best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So before today's meeting, I received some questions from other people who can now join today. And the question that people most concerned, besides the state Michigan unique question or US unique question, is for our Chinese American community unique questions. That for the past 2 years, our community faced special challenges during the pandemic. And if you heard the news that there were a lot of bad things happening, crimes committed against the Chinese Americans in West Coast and the East Coast. Not so bad in Michigan yet, I hope. And so for this, as Attorney General, I think your function, your duty is to safeguard the public from violent criminals and helping victims of crime. I'm reading that from the State of Michigan website. Mm-hmm. So what can you do once you're elected to the office? What can you do in terms of the hate crimes against Chinese Americans or Asian Americans? And what is your advice to us now that we can help ourselves?
Well, first things first is making certain that our law enforcement and our police departments are funded. And when I say funded, when you say that, many believe that, that is the police officer in uniform. And yes, that is important, more of those officers on the streets. But I will tell you, as a former prosecutor, probably the only police officer that's more important than the one that's in uniform are the undercover ones that are actually out there investigating these crimes and trying to make certain that if a crime's been committed, it's solved, or out there trying to gather intelligence to ensure that a crime doesn't occur. They take somebody off the streets before they commit a violent crime. But we can't have those individuals on the streets if we're trying to defund our local law enforcement. So standing with law enforcement, making certain that we not only fund them, but get them additional funding so that they not only have those uniformed police officers on the streets, but that they also have those detectives and those undercover officers. I've been on the streets with those undercover officers. I've watched them work. They're the best in the business, and we need to make certain that they continue to stay out there. If we defund the police, what's going to happen is those undercover officers and those detectives are going to be the first ones they're going to be pulled off or they're going to cut. And that is not going to be good for investigating hate crimes.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think any other questions in the audience? It's already 15 minutes past 9, so we're about to close this meeting.
Ning, I think there's a question in the chat window, ask Tom's website. Yes, I said you said already. Okay.
Yeah, I sent it. So if anyone is interested in helping with Tom's campaign or making donations, I put the website in the chat, and you can also get to know him a little bit more about his background and achievement.
And the donations, you know, it's the one part of the business that I hate the most, but we have to have them. And if there's if you can get the word out there, I mean, I will tell you, a few weeks ago, we actually had somebody go onto our website. We've had people donate $5. We had one person donated $1. I can't tell you how touching that is, because I know if that person's willing to go online and just give some part of their precious resources, that they are invested in our campaign. So anything you can do to get the word out for the contributions, because we probably still have to raise close to an additional $3 million if we're going to go on the airwaves. I know we'll get there, but every dollar that comes in now is going to go on television or radio, exposing Dana Nessel.
Okay. And for the audience, if you click on the link on the flyer or poster we send in the WeChat group, there's a link to Tom's website, and there's also another link to MICCA, our website, and you can make donation as well. Any other questions from the audience? So Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for coming to us and come to this session and connect to us, and really appreciate it, and especially appreciate your excellent history of public service. You have done a lot when you were the state representative, mental health issues, criminal justice reform, making Michigan a much better place. Really appreciate you come out again and give us hope that we can beat the liberal AG that on the state right now, who only have the Roman showers fantasy, I guess, besides our business. So really appreciate it. And for the audience, really appreciate you coming out and to support this effort from MICCA. And if you are not in our WeChat group, I encourage you to join us because 2022 is a very critical year for Michigan to be back on track. This is a midterm election. We have to win. And we have to get rid of those liberals that are hurting our community. So I really appreciate everybody. And thank you very much, Tom, again.
Yeah, no, thank you. And listen, before this is over, I can't wait. When it starts to warm up a little bit, I want to see everybody in person. I'm okay doing Zoom meetings, but I like to be in person. So I can't wait to see everybody at an in-person meeting, okay?
That would be great.
Absolutely.
We can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we miss your beautiful family, Tom.
Thank you.
You have 2 kids now.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next session is this coming Saturday. We're going to meet with another candidate of the governor. I think his name is Thomas Chan, something like that. So Saturday evening, 2 p.m.
Austin Chan.
Austin Chan. That's the next candidate we'll be talking to. So thank you everyone for joining today.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good night.
Good night.
Appreciate
Good
that.
night. Good night. Thank you so much.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.